welcome back to Wrestling Collector Zone. Today what I have for you is a video that I'm going to be taking a look at. Our last video we had taken a look at the top 3 worst wrestling matches that I've seen. And this is going to be a top 10 list. And I'm going to keep it kind of short, or at least try to keep it short. This is going to be a top 10 list of the worst gimmicks that I know of. I'm not going to go over too much about them. If you're interested, you can do your own research on them. If you've been a wrestling fan for quite a few years, dating back to the early 90s, or mainly even back to like 98, 99, you would know most of these people off of this list. And so let's just go ahead and jump right into the list. Number 10 is they were more of a team or faction versus actually just one gimmick, but it was their whole gimmick for their faction, which was 3 count in WCW. 3 count consisted of, I should have looked it up because I can't remember who else was in there, but I know Shane Helms was in there, and Shane Helms is the only one that actually came from 3 count that was actually a good wrestler and made it out to have like actually good gimmick later on, as now known as the Hurricane. But 3 count later on even got worse when they added in Tank Abbott, which was a UFC fighter that had made his way to wrestling to WCW. Just overall, their gimmick was horrible. Their gimmick was basically like a singing boy band kind of get up, and it was awful. I don't want to say, that they're down lower because I'm going 10 down to 1 being worst. But they definitely make the list on the top 10. Number 9 would be, and this had came out of TNA Impact Wrestling, was Little Petey Pump. That honestly was a horrible gimmick. I loved Petey Williams. I still do. He's a great wrestler. But basically, for those of you that don't remember or didn't see this gimmick, at that time, Scott Steiner was in TNA Impact, and Little Petey Pump was a small version of Scott Steiner. They had him bleach his hair. They had him wear the red or the metal, I don't even know if that is, like chainmail on his head coming out. Had the trunk similar to his. Just overall a smaller version of Scott Steiner. And it was awful. I don't know why they even had actually changed his gimmick, because Petey Williams is a great wrestler, and sometimes with wrestlers, when they mess with their gimmicks, unfortunately, it can really ruin their career. Luckily for Petey Williams, it did not ruin his career, but definitely could have, and just overall was a horrible idea for a gimmick. Now we're going to make our way down to number 7, which was after Razor Ramon and Diesel, or Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, had left WWF to go to WCW. To kind of poke fun, WWF decided to bring in fake Razor Ramon and fake Diesel that were lookalikes, supposed to be lookalikes. To me, they really did not look like them that much, but it was just a horrible idea. They should have let the gimmick die, but instead of letting those gimmicks die, they decided to poke fun, I think, to try to get a rise out of Kevin Nash and Razor Ramon or Scott Hall once they had went to WCW, which obviously I don't think it did work. But that was a horrible idea on Vince McMahon to even let that make it through and actually air on TV. And I think went on for a decent time, at least a couple of months or so. And number 6 would be the Spirit Squad, which again was like a faction stable team. And they were male cheerleaders. I'm not trying to poke fun of or make fun of male cheerleaders at all, but really male cheerleaders, a team of male cheerleaders are coming to beat you up, in wrestling. I don't think that gimmick really has a place. And someone that actually came out of Spirit Squad was Dolph Ziggler, but just overall was a terrible idea, and I don't know why they even had the Spirit Squad. Anyways, going down to number 5 is the Boogeyman. The Boogeyman was supposed to be that terrifying, creepy, coming to get ya, Boogeyman character that they had portrayed until they debuted him. But it was an awful idea of a gimmick because the man would come out eating and having actual live worms hanging out of his mouth and just gross things. It was a terrible idea. He would lick and eat gross things. And there was the whole Lillian Garcia or whatever thing it was, where she had that growth on the side of her face, and he sat there and on TV in the middle of the ring had licked it and then bit it off her face, supposedly. It was all fake, but it was just that gimmick was terrible. I think to this day he still has that gimmick. I don't know in WWE. I don't think he's in WWE no more, but I think he still does that gimmick somewhere. Number 4 would be a announcer or a commentator, more so, was Ed Ferrara, I believe. He played the gimmick in WCW later on. They decided to come up with, I don't know who came up with the idea, if it was him or what, but they came up with the Oklahoma gimmick, basically poking fun and making fun of JR. And this, I think, was after he had had another stroke and was dealing with his Bell's palsy and stuff again. And to me, that's really unfortunate that they did that. It's really wrong because they were doing it to poke fun of and make fun of the fact of he had Bell's palsy and all that. And when it comes to medical issues and stuff like that, that's not funny in any way. And just overall, since when did, there's been a couple, but since when did a commentator really have much of a gimmick? And to decide to do that and just make fun of someone that's having a medical issue going on, that's not funny in any way. And that was wrong of WCW to let that happen. I'm going down to number 3 is it's gonna factor into 2. It's one man, one wrestler, but 2 separate gimmicks he had in the same company, which was in WCW when Mike Awesome left ECW and went to WCW. I'm trying to remember which gimmick he had first. I want to say they first gave him the gimmick, the Fat Chick Thriller, where he came out with like fat women and everything, and that was his whole gimmick. And then he changed to that 70s guy wearing like the whole suits and just awful. Like literally WCW ruined Mike Awesome's career. Flat out, I will say that. And that's very sad because Mike Awesome was one of my favorite wrestlers, like in ECW. And when he was in Japan and FMW, that man could wrestle. He was a big man, but he could fly and he could do it all. And just overall perform really great matches. And for WCW to ruin his career the way they did, like, I just don't understand like how they couldn't find a place for him, because honestly, he is world championship material. He was in ECW, he was in FMW, he could have been in WCW, but instead they didn't know what they were doing, and that's real sad. And you know, as I don't know if some of you know or not, but God rest his soul, that Mike Awesome has passed away by now, years ago, not too long after I think WCW had went out of business and he went to WWE for a while. And then I think he got into the realtor business, and then had passed away later on, unfortunately, of suicide. But that was real sad. And then number 2 is the African Dream, Akeem, which was terrible. I somewhat remember this character. This was like early 90s. But I'm glad that I wasn't old enough to really remember this, because like the African Dream, Akeem, was from was the gimmick of one-man gang, originally one-man gang, and then WWF decided to change his gimmick to the African Dream, Akeem, that he was basically reclaiming his African roots, that he was African, and the man was white as white could be. Like, it was a very somewhat racist gimmick. From my understanding, what I read on and I watched the footage of, that they sat there and like how he could reclaim his heritage was he had to go through like a African ceremony, ancient ceremony, which apparently they had recorded and put on, or ritual that they did record and put on TV apparently. And it was basically where they went and filmed it was like in the ghetto, and then put it on TV. And it was just like, honestly, especially that being like the 90s, it's the 90s by then. Like, come on, like, you're gonna do some racist gimmick stuff like that. Like, WWF, like, you know, come on. And then number 1 would be Bastion Booger, which Bastion Booger was this big fat guy, basically that he just devoured everything that he saw. He would eat and be a slob and get it all over himself, and greasy and real nasty and stuff like that. And it was just like, honestly, a disgraceful gimmick. Like, why have a gimmick like that on somebody, and why put a professional wrestler in the ring and make them even play that gimmick? And it was just overall horrible. And from what I had read and watched on some videos, that apparently it was one of the wrestlers in WWF that the gimmick was in WWF, and the reason that he was given this gimmick was to be punished because of his weight. But the fact of the matter is, if you're punishing him because of his weight, you're sitting there and making fun of him and making him devour more food on live TV and gain more weight. I don't know. Overall, that gimmick just was number one, the worst gimmick there was that I can remember up to this date. If later on there are gimmicks that I can remember or come up something like that and could update the list, maybe we'll see about revisiting this list. But other than that, that is the top 10 worst wrestling gimmicks in history that I know of and can remember. This was another video of the Wrestling Collector Zone. Please make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Go ahead and post below if you have any questions. Go ahead and start a conversation. Tell us what you think. Are these the top 10 worst gimmicks? Or do you have a separate top 10 list or top 5 list or whatever that you want to put out there? But either way, thanks again for joining us at the Wrestling Collector Zone. And you guys have a great day.